It's my pleasure to talk about Telecare, independence and vitality in later life and the policy relevance of AKTIVE. I'm going to briefly introduce the AKTIVE project to you, and you'll be hearing more about it during the 2 days of the conference, and you've also got copies in your delegate bags of the first 5 working papers which the social research team involved in AKTIVE has produced and launched today, and which are also up now on the AKTIVE website, gone up this morning. We had the good fortune to be awarded Technology Strategy Board funding to support this project back in 2010, and we started the project in 2011, and we're nearly at the end of our 3-year journey through AKTIVE. And you can see on the left-hand side of the slide there the project design that we've had. 4 partners, the 2 universities, the University of Leeds through my research centre that I lead, Circle, and at the University of Oxford, the Oxford Institute of Population Ageing, and 2 industrial partners, Tunstall Healthcare UK Limited and Inventure Limited, who have been pivotal in helping us to identify the full spectrum of issues that are relevant to understanding how we can use telecare to support older people better in later life. A social research team with qualitative and mixed method skills, and a consortium, and I'd like to pay tribute also to the members of that, many of whom are here today, the 2 telecare services in Leeds and in Oxfordshire who have helped us to access the respondents who took part in our study, and also the other experts who you can see the kinds of expertise that we've been able to include in our consortium on the slide. And our social research activities have been quite diverse. That's why I said it was a mixed methods approach, and we tried to take a perspective on everyone involved in systems that support older people and look at how technology and telecare in particular can support them. So you can see there the kinds of things that we've done, centrally focused on what we've called everyday life analysis. And this is the unique feature of the study, where Simon's just mentioned we had an opportunity over up to a year to recruit older people using telecare into the study in the 2 localities, and then to visit them repeatedly using a design that was developed by the team, but initially conceived by myself and Professor Andreas Hoff, who's here today, who now works in Germany, but who worked on the development of the project with me and with others involved. And you can see there that we finally recruited into the study 60 older people whose lives we were able to study in detail. And it's that holistic, longitudinal and creative method that we've used with them which I think has given us particular and important insights. The aims and the ambitions of our project were to focus on older people living at home with 2 particular types of frailty: susceptibility to falls and memory problems or dementia, particularly if it was at a relatively early stage. People needed to have the ability to consent to participate in our study, but many people had memory problems. And we chose those 2 topics because they're so costly, so important and so significant for individuals. And we were aiming to address the challenges that arise from population ageing, but to see also opportunities that arise from technological progress. And we aimed to add to knowledge of the lives, needs and aspirations, not only of older people, but of their families and carers, and also to enhance understanding of how they and other people who attend them at home can access and engage with and make best use of telecare equipment. So our implementation strategy, in brief, is summarised on that page. I'm not going to take you through all of that, but you can see that we've also been committed throughout to dissemination and to try to ensure that we engaged with the whole range of players in this complex system into which older people find themselves sometimes thrown quite suddenly and having to try to find their way through a minefield, which can be an experience for people if they suddenly find themselves in need of support. When AKTIVE began, the telecare world was awaiting the whole systems demonstrator randomised controlled trial. I'm not going to say much about that in this introductory session, but I'm sure there will be discussion about it later in the conference. That was an attempt to measure the impact of telecare rather than the way you might measure the impact of a drug or a surgical intervention. I think my personal view is that there are some misconceptions into what we could achieve through doing that. But our project was very, very different. And what we've done is to try to really get to understand everyday life and what happens to people when they encounter frailty in later life, which many, although not all people do. The literature was already highlighting that privacy and intrusion were things we ought to be concerned about. And I have to say that in AKTIVE we found hardly anybody who was very bothered about that. And so I think there's a debate in the literature which is perhaps significant but not necessarily at the centre of real people's concerns. And there was a focus on peace of mind. And that's been mentioned again this morning. It's an important concept, but it's also a vague and not very specifically articulated concept, and we've tried to drill down into that and understand it a bit more. Sector intelligence indicated at the time that we started that take-up was sluggish, that older people took some persuading to accept Telecare, and that they often, when they had it, used it intermittently, reluctantly, or in some cases not at all. And local authorities were in a key role, approaching Telecare in a variety of different ways, and you've heard the example that we've had from John this morning with Birmingham, one of the leaders, I think, in the way in which Telecare can be offered. But in our study, Leeds and Oxfordshire approaching the implementation of Telecare very differently. And older people themselves and those who support them having few other access options other than local authorities. Health professionals, when we started, were often sceptical of the value of Telecare and seemed to have scant information about it. And families and older people had limited knowledge of products and services that were available to them and few ways of getting these. But the thing that really struck us was that the voices of older people and those who support them were not being readily heard, and that little was being said about their experiences and about what they needed as their needs, their desires, their circumstances and their relationships changed. And all of those things are important components of their lives. So what we did was to choose a method which focused on everyday life and on everyone involved. And we sought to understand how Telecare fits in. Not what can Telecare do, but how does it fit in and how does it support the things that everybody wants to happen for older people to have better lives. We worked with industry specialists and the service providers and our multidisciplinary consortium. And we tried to explore options and barriers and opportunities and potential. And those are the things that we're writing about and talking about in the outputs from the study. We've used, as I mentioned, an innovative methods approach and drawn on multidisciplinary perspectives. And I think that's been a really important component. And the people that have helped us think about design and have added in clinicians' perspectives and have helped us to think about hazards and systems have really helped to add to what, as social scientists, we could do as a social research team on our own. And we've tried to integrate user, carer, industrial, sector, research and market perspectives. It's been quite a challenge, but I think in bringing together the consortium that we've had the opportunity to really do something which has been significant. And what have we learned? Well, there's lots of detail, obviously, in our papers and in what you'll hear about later today and indeed beyond, because our project isn't yet finished and there will be more activities in the months to come before we complete the project. But it's not a simple intervention, but a mix, I think, of tools for living. It's a support system which connects people to each other and to timely assistance. And these tools for living can help people living with frailties, and there are examples in our study of people for whom all of these outcomes that were achieved, to exercise choice, to retain dignity, and to do what they want, where they wish to be, in their own way. Some older people do resist or reject Telecare, and they do that when they find it stigmatising, when they find it awkward or troublesome to use, when they think it's unattractive to have in their homes or about their person, or if they feel it's been imposed upon them. All of those responses are clues to what needs to change and who can do something about it, and that's what we're going to try to learn from. What needs to change? Well, I think it's worth mentioning that the social research team and two members of the research team here in the audience today, I'd like to thank them for all the hard work they've done in pulling the project together. Gary Fry here at Leeds and Kate Hamlin, who's from Oxford, but also our other researchers, Emanuela Bianchera and Emerita Koivunen, who are not here today. They found that too many older people in our everyday life analysis were lonely, were sad, or were managing in adverse circumstances. Too many of them faced constraints which impoverished their daily lives, and that's a challenge to us all to do something better. And I think we all felt as we read the data or as we encountered these older people that there really was something more we ought to be doing for some of these people. Often we found that family and friends and neighbours could see the value of Telecare, but we found in our research that many home care workers knew little about it, didn't really know why it was there, what it could do, how it might help. Some of them felt it had nothing to do with them, or was separate from their role, didn't concern them. And what we found was that if the right equipment was installed, and if it was adapted to need, then it could transform lives. And it was giving people freedoms and reassurance and help to cope and the ability to continue activities which enhance their well-being and their quality of life. It's not just about being safe at home, it's about keeping active, it's about confidence to carry on, it's about reducing tensions within relationships around care, it's about connecting people to others, it's about feeling continuously supported and connected. And who needs to act to deliver on some of these things that need to be done? Well, there are roles for everyone, and as our earlier speakers have shown, there are people really thinking seriously about this in positions that matter. And I think it's really important that we've got John here from Britain's biggest, England's largest local authority, and we've got Alison here from the Telecare Services Association, the industry body. But there are roles here for developers and industry. There are roles here for health and social care staff and policymakers. There is a role for the health and wellbeing boards that we've now got established. We've got new delivery options. We need to be thinking about retailers and GPs and marketing, enhanced support. Older people often feel left behind by new developments. I know that through my own 92-year-old father, who's struggled but is managed to send something on his iPad yesterday to my grandson, which caused great excitement on the text messaging system. But it can be a struggle, and we need to make with the support we give people something they can understand. And telecare systems could rise to the challenge of helping older people to become early adopters of great products and services that they want because they add so much to their lives. So I'll conclude with this slide and this challenge to you for the rest of the conference. Is telecare relevant to policy? Well, just look at that list of policy goals that I think probably most of us would share. Quality of life, cohesive communities, 24/7 assistance, ageing in place, dignity and choice in old age, best use of human resources, avoidance of care restraint, cost effectiveness. Telecare can help us with all of those things if we do it right. And so our challenge, I think, is to think about how we actually turn those policy aims into lived reality, and to actually use human ingenuity and the technology that we have to build it into our systems of support so that older people's lives are better, more rewarding, and enable them to do what they want and not just have their needs met. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sue. Excellent, really thought-provoking, gives you an overview of the findings.